Your Honor, I'm just tired, trying to hold my family together.
Every morning, before I step into the courtroom, I take a moment in my chambers to reflect. I look at this black robe hanging on the door, and I remind myself of a cold, hard truth. While this garment represents the authority of the law, it is also a heavy burden. People who enter my courtroom are often at their breaking point. They arrive defensive, nervous, or simply hollowed out by the relentless weight of the world. My job isn't just to recite statutes from the City of Providence legal books. It is to peel back the layers of excuses and find the human pulse that the law books so often ignore. In my court, there is no room for performance, only the truth. Today, the air in the courtroom felt particularly heavy. The bench was stacked high with files, parking violations, expired registrations, speeding tickets. To some, these are minor infractions, mere paperwork. But from where I sit, these files are a map of a city's struggle. For the person standing at the podium, a $50 fine is often the jagged edge between paying rent or going hungry. I adjusted my glasses, scanned the room with a gaze that demands order, and called the next case. Marcus Sterling, I announced. My voice was steady, projecting an authority that cut through the murmurs in the gallery. A young man stepped forward. He couldn't have been more than 18 or 19 years old. As he approached the podium, I didn't see the flicker of defiance or the too cool attitude I often see in the youth of today. Instead, I saw a boy whose shoulders were slumped as if he were carrying an invisible sack of stones. His eyes were rimmed with a deep, painful red, and his movements were slow, the kind of deliberate, heavy movement you only see in someone who hasn't felt the relief of a full night's sleep in a very long time. "Good morning, Marcus," I said, my eyes locking onto his. I wanted to see if he would meet my gaze or hide behind a mask of indifference. "How are you today?" He looked up, and for a split second, he seemed genuinely stunned that a judge cared about his state of mind. I'm okay, Your Honor. Thank you." I looked down at the file. The paper didn't lie, but it didn't tell the whole story either. Marcus was here for a series of parking tickets, 6 of them, all accumulated within the last 60 days. Overnight parking in restricted zones, failure to move for street cleaning, the usual list of oversights. But with late fees, the total had ballooned to over $400. To a teenager, that isn't a fine. It's a mountain of debt designed to crush you. "Marcus," I began, leaning forward, my voice dropping to a tone that was firm, yet invited honesty. "You've managed to collect quite a debt here. 6 tickets in 2 months. That's more than just a mistake. That's a pattern of ignoring the signs. Usually, when I see this, it tells me the person doesn't care about the rules of this city. Tell me, why should I believe you're any different?" Marcus gripped the sides of the podium so hard his knuckles turned white. He looked like he was trying to hold himself together. "Your Honor, I know I should have moved the car. I promise I wasn't trying to break the law. It's just, I've been having a very hard time keeping track of what day it is." I watched him closely. In 10 years on this bench, I've learned that the most profound truths often live in the pauses between words, in the slight tremor of a voice. "Why is it hard to keep track of the days, Marcus? Are you a student?" "Yes, sir," he whispered. "I'm a full-time student at the community college. I'm studying to be an EMT, an emergency medical technician." I nodded slowly. "That's a noble path. We need people who run toward the fire when everyone else is running away. But being a student doesn't usually make a man forget where he parked his car for a week. There is something else, isn't there?" Marcus let out a long, weary sigh, a sound so hollow it seemed to drain the last bit of energy from his frame. "I work, Your Honor. I work a lot." "Tell me about your work, Marcus," I encouraged. My voice remained steady, but my eyes never left his. I wasn't looking for a scripted answer. I was looking for the reality that the statistics in my file couldn't capture. Marcus cleared his throat, a sound that seemed to catch on the jagged edges of his exhaustion. "I have a job at the warehouse near the docks, Your Honor. I start there at 10 p.m. and work until 6 a.m. It's physically demanding, mostly loading crates, moving heavy inventory. It's a lot of manual labor." I did the math in my head instantly. "And then you go straight to your 8 a.m. classes?" "Yes, sir," he replied, his voice dropping an octave. filled with a heaviness that resonated through the quiet courtroom. I finished school around 1 p.m. The room went silent. Even the bailiff, a man who has heard every excuse under the sun for the last 20 years, shifted his weight, his expression softening as he looked at the young man. I looked at Marcus's hands. They weren't the soft hands of a typical 19-year-old. They were calloused, stained with the kind of deep-seated grime that doesn't just wash off with soap, the unmistakable mark of honest, grueling, back-breaking labor. "And when do you sleep, son?" I asked. The word son slipped out unintentionally, a rare departure from my usual judicial distance. "I try to sleep in the afternoons," Marcus said, looking down at his worn shoes. "But 3 days a week, I have a second job. I work at the diner from 2 p.m. until 8 p.m. On those days, I usually just catch an hour of sleep in my car before I have to head back to the warehouse for the night shift." I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking in the silence. I thought about my own father, Antonio. He was an immigrant, a milkman who used to get up in the freezing dark long before the sun even thought about rising. He did it to provide for us, and he never complained. He used to tell me, "Frank, if you work hard and treat people with dignity, you can look any man in the eye." Looking at Marcus, I saw that same quiet dignity, the bedrock of the American spirit, but I also saw a boy who was running on fumes, a human engine pushed far beyond its intended capacity. "Marcus," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper that commanded more attention than a shout, "you are working through the night, going to school all morning, and then working a second job in the afternoon. Why? Why are you pushing yourself to this absolute limit?" He didn't hesitate. He didn't look for pity. He just spoke the truth of his life. "My mother lost her job 6 months ago, Your Honor. She has chronic back pain and can't stand for long periods anymore. My younger sister is in high school. Someone had to pay the rent. Someone had to keep the lights on. I'm the man of the house now. I don't want us to lose our apartment. I can't let them down." I felt a familiar tightening in my chest. This is the story of the working poor in this city, the people who do everything right, who work until their bones ache, and yet find themselves one car breakdown or one series of parking tickets away from total disaster. The law sees a violator. I saw a protector. "So these tickets," I said, gesturing to the file containing the $420 debt. "The overnight parking, the failure to move for street cleaning. Explain how that happens in your schedule. I get home from the diner or from school, and I'm just so exhausted, Your Honor," he admitted, his voice trembling slightly for the first time. "Sometimes I pull over near our apartment, and I think I'll just close my eyes for 5 minutes before I find a legal spot. The next thing I know, it's 3 hours later, or it's the next morning, and there's a yellow slip on my windshield. I don't mean to break the law. I'm just so tired." He didn't say it as a plea for mercy. He said it as a simple statement of fact. I am tired. It was a weariness that went deeper than muscles or bones. It was a weariness of the soul. The silence that followed Marcus's confession wasn't the empty silence of an unoccupied room. It was a heavy, suffocating stillness, the kind of silence that happens when the cold machinery of the law suddenly grinds to a halt against the raw reality of human sacrifice. I looked out into the gallery. Usually, people are checking their phones, whispering about their own cases, or looking at the clock, desperate to leave. But today, every head was turned toward the podium. They weren't looking at a defendant anymore. They were looking at a mirror of the struggle so many of them know all too well. I took off my glasses and set them slowly on the bench. I wanted Marcus to see my eyes, not the reflection of the courtroom lights in my lenses. I wanted him to know that for this moment, he wasn't just another file in a stack of 100. "Marcus," I said, my voice echoing with a resonance that demanded he look up. "I want you to look at me. Raise your head, son." He complied, his eyes moist, blinking back the salt and the fatigue that threatened to spill over. "In this courtroom," I continued, leaning in, "I see a lot of people. I see people who make elaborate excuses for why they can't follow the simplest rules. I see people who blame the world, the economy, their neighbors, or the system for every mistake they've ever made. I see people who have every opportunity handed to them on a silver platter and throw it all away because they lack the discipline to care. But then, every once in a while, someone like you walks through those swinging doors. I let the words settle, letting them hang in the air like a gavel strike. You are 19 years old. At an age when most young men in this country are consumed by video games, social media, or just the pursuit of their own pleasure, you are carrying the entire foundation of your family on your back. You are working 16 hours a day, going to school to build a future that will allow you to save the lives of others, and ensuring that your mother and sister have a roof over their heads. Do you realize how rare that is? Do you realize that what you are doing is the very definition of a man of character? Marcus swallowed hard. A single tear escaped and traced a path through the faint grime on his cheek. He shook his head slightly, almost as if he were embarrassed by the praise. I'm just doing what I have to do, sir, he whispered. No, I countered, my voice sharp with conviction. You are doing what a person of honor does. You are showing us what it means to lead through sacrifice. You are the invisible gear that keeps this city turning, Marcus. And yet, the only time the system notices you is when you fall behind on a payment or miss a street cleaning sign because you were too tired to see straight. I looked down at the total again, $420. In the grand scheme of a city's multi-million-dollar budget, it was a rounding error. It was nothing. But for Marcus, I knew exactly what that number represented. It wasn't just $400. It was a week and a half of sweat in a cold warehouse. It was the electricity bill for the entire winter. It was the food on his sister's plate for a month. To demand this money from him wouldn't be justice. It would be a financial execution of his family's stability. I felt a surge of what my father called the spirit of the law. The law is a set of rules, yes, but the spirit of the law is the reason those rules exist, to protect the community and to uphold what is right. And right now, the law was threatening to punish a young man for the very virtues we should be building monuments to. I picked up my pen, the cool plastic feeling heavy in my hand. In that moment, I felt a sense of clarity that only comes when justice and mercy meet in a perfect, silent balance. I looked over at the city inspector, a man who has seen thousands of people pass through this room, thousands of excuses, and thousands of lies. He didn't look annoyed. He didn't look like he was losing a case. He was nodding slowly, a small, respectful smile on his face. In this room, we are all part of the same community, and we all know that sometimes the letter of the law has to step aside to make room for the spirit of humanity. I leaned back and looked at Marcus. Marcus, I knew what the law said before you even walked in here. The law says you are guilty of these 6 violations. The law says you owe the city of Providence $420. My job is to enforce that law. But if I were to fine you this money today, tell me, what would that do to your family's situation? Be honest with me. Marcus swallowed, his hands still gripping the podium as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. We'd probably fall behind on the rent, Your Honor. I've been trying to save up for this court date, but something always comes up. The car needed a new tire last week. My sister needed books for school. I don't have the money today. I nodded. I had seen enough. I had heard enough. I looked at the clerk, then back at Marcus, my voice dropping to a tone of absolute finality. Marcus Sterling, I announced, my voice echoing slightly in the chamber. Regarding these 6 violations totaling $420, I am making a decision. I look at you and I see the foundation of what makes this country great. It's not the politicians or the people with the big bank accounts. It's the people who work the night shift at the warehouse and the day shift at the diner to take care of the people they love. Therefore, the court finds that you have already paid a much higher price than any fine I could impose. You have paid with your youth. You have paid with your sleep. You have paid with your own comfort to ensure your family survives. I paused, then spoke the words that changed the air in the room. I am dismissing every single one of them. The fines are 0. The court costs are 0. Your record is clear. The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't the silence of tension. It was the silence of a held breath finally being released. Marcus didn't move for a moment. He stayed frozen at the podium, his hands still gripping the wood so hard his knuckles were white. Then, slowly, his head dropped. He wasn't sobbing loudly, but I could see his shoulders shaking. The weight of that $400 mountain had just been lifted off his back. And for a 19-year-old who had been carrying the world, that relief must have felt like oxygen after being underwater for far too long. I sat back, watching him. This is the duality of the bench. You have to be able to see the difference between a mistake born of hardship and a violation born of arrogance. Justice isn't a cold, mechanical thing. If it were, we could just let a computer decide these cases. But a computer can't see the red in a boy's eyes. A computer can't hear the tremor in his voice when he talks about his mother. A computer can't feel the weight of the silence when a young man's dignity is on the line. As Marcus stood there, the silence in the courtroom wasn't empty. It was heavy with the weight of a life-changing moment. I watched him closely. The tension that had held his spine rigid for the last 20 minutes finally snapped. His shoulders dropped, not in defeat, but in a release of pressure so profound it was visible to everyone in the gallery. I'm not doing this because I think the law doesn't matter. I'm doing this because Marcus is already paying a much higher price than any fine I could impose. He is paying with his youth. He is paying with his sleep. He is paying with his own comfort to ensure his family survives. That, in itself, is a life sentence of responsibility that most adults never have to face. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the polished wood of the bench. "Marcus," I said softly, waiting for him to look up from his hands. When he finally met my gaze, he was wiping his eyes with the back of his hand, a hand that had probably loaded thousands of pounds of crates just a few hours ago. "Tell me about this EMT program. Why do you want to be a paramedic? Why choose a life where you're constantly surrounded by other people's crises?" He cleared his throat, struggling to find his voice amidst the emotion. I want to help people, Your Honor. When my mom got sick, the paramedics who came to the house, they were so calm. They made her feel like she was going to be okay. They made me feel like it was going to be okay. I want to be that person for someone else. I want to be the one who arrives when things are at their worst and brings a little bit of peace. I felt a warmth in my chest that I rarely allow myself to show on the bench. This young man, despite being exhausted and overworked, despite being penalized by the city for just trying to survive, still wanted to dedicate his life to saving others. It is moments like these that remind me why I've stayed on this bench for so many decades. People often ask me if I get tired of the same stories, the same excuses. I tell them that for every 100 people who try to pull a fast one or lie to my face, there is one Marcus Sterling, and that one person makes all the rest of it worth it. "Marcus," I said, shifting gears, "how much money do you have in your pocket right now, at this very moment?" He looked confused, perhaps thinking I was looking for a way to still collect a small fee. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a few crumpled, thin bills. He counted them slowly. "I have $12, sir. I was going to use it for gas to get to the warehouse tonight, so I wouldn't be late for my shift." $12. That was the entirety of his liquid assets. I looked at my clerk. "Do we still have the Good Samaritan Fund from the donations people send to the court?" The clerk nodded immediately. "Yes, Judge, we do." "Good," I said, turning back to Marcus. "I want you to take $50 from that fund, but I'm not giving it to you for your tickets. Those are gone. I want you to use that money to take your mother and your sister out for a meal. Or maybe just buy yourself a decent dinner before you go to work tonight. You've been providing for everyone else. Today, let the community provide for you." Marcus started to protest, his pride, the same pride that kept him working 2 jobs, kicking in. "Oh, no, Your Honor. I didn't come here for a handout." "You can and you will," I interrupted with a small, firm smile. "It's not a gift from me. It's a gift from people around the world who watch this courtroom and believe in the kind of person you are. It's a reminder that even when things are at their darkest, there is light. There are people who see you, Marcus. We see the work you're doing. We see the sacrifice you're making, and we want you to know that you are not alone in that warehouse at 3 a.m. We are standing there with you." Marcus stood a little taller then. The exhaustion was still there, etched into the deep lines around his eyes and the way his hands rested on the wood, but there was a spark of something else now. It was pride, a quiet, burning dignity that had been buried under the crushing weight of bills and back-to-back shifts. I stood up slightly, leaning over the bench to bridge the distance between us. I didn't want to speak to him as a judge. I wanted to speak to him as a man who understands that the future of this city depends on people like him. "I want you to promise me something, son," I said, my voice firm, carrying the weight of a sacred trust. I want you to finish that EMT program. I don't care how tired you are. I don't care if you have to sleep in your car between classes or if you feel like you can't load one more crate at that warehouse. You get that certification. This city needs you. We need people who know what it means to struggle because those are the people who have the most compassion when they are helping someone else in their darkest hour. Do you understand me? Marcus looked me straight in the eye, his gaze unwavering for the first time. I promise, Your Honor, I won't let you down. You aren't letting anyone down, Marcus, I said firmly. In fact, I want to say this for the record so everyone in this courtroom can hear it. You are the kind of young man who makes us proud to be from this community. You are a credit to your mother, and you are a credit to this city. Now, go home, get an hour of sleep if you can, and keep moving forward. He thanked me, his voice thick with emotion, and walked toward the exit. As he passed through the swinging doors, I noticed something remarkable. The people in the gallery, the ones who usually sit there, bored, annoyed, or anxious about their own fates, didn't go back to their phones right away. They watched him leave. The energy in the room had shifted. It was no longer a place of punishment. It had become a place of shared humanity. For a brief moment, we weren't strangers in a bureaucracy. We were witnesses to a hero in a stained t-shirt. I sat back down and took a deep breath. My mind was still on Marcus, thinking about the millions like him, the invisible gears that keep our society turning, the ones we only notice when they break a minor rule or fall behind on a payment. We've become a society that is too quick to punish and too slow to understand. We see a parking ticket and we see a violation. We don't see the person who was too exhausted to drive another block to find a legal spot. But as a judge, and more importantly, as a man who happens to be a judge, I know that justice isn't a cold, mechanical calculation. If it were, we could replace this bench with an algorithm, but an algorithm can't see the soul. It can't recognize virtue. My father, Antonio, used to say, Frank, you use your mind, but you lead with your heart. I looked at the next file on my desk. The contrast was about to be jarring. This is the duality of the bench. You have to be able to pivot from compassion to firmness in the blink of an eye. You have to be able to see the difference between a mistake born of hardship and a violation born of arrogance. Next case, I called out, my voice returning to its sharp, professional edge. Mr. Anthony Rossi. A middle-aged man walked up to the podium. He was wearing an expensive, tailored suit, checking a gold watch with an air of profound annoyance. He looked at the room as if being here was an insult to his schedule. He was here for a speeding ticket, 45 inches, a 25 miles per hour school zone. He had everything, Marcus, lacked money, status, and rest. And yet, as he opened his mouth to speak, I already knew he lacked the one thing Marcus had in abundance: character. The contrast between Marcus Sterling and Anthony Rossi was not just a difference in bank accounts. It was a fundamental difference in the fabric of their souls. Rossi looked at me with an expression that bordered on contempt. He wasn't scared. He was inconvenienced. Your Honor, I have a board meeting in 20 minutes, he said, checking his gold watch again. Can we wrap this up? I was just keeping up with the flow of traffic, and frankly, that school zone sign was partially obscured by a tree branch. I looked at the evidentiary photos provided by the ticketing officer. The sign was perfectly visible, standing bold and clear against the morning sky. I looked back at Mr. Rossi. The air in the courtroom, which had just been filled with the warm resonance of Marcus's sacrifice, turned cold. This is the duality of the bench. Marcus had absolutely nothing, yet he took full responsibility for his mistakes. Mr. Rossi had everything, yet his first instinct was to litigate a tree branch and prioritize his schedule over the safety of children. Mr. Rossi, I said, my voice dropping to a level that was cold as steel. We just had a 19-year-old man in here who works 16 hours a day to keep his family in an apartment. He was exhausted to the point of collapse, and yet he didn't make a single excuse. He simply told the truth. You, on the other hand, were driving 20 miles over the limit in a school zone. Your time is valuable, sir, but it is not more important than the life of a child. Accountability is for those who think the rules are suggestions. I am upholding the maximum fine and court costs. Pay the clerk on your way out. He huffed, his face flushing red, and marched out. I watched him go. then took a deep breath to reset. This is the constant pivot required of a judge, moving from compassion to firmness in the blink of an eye. You have to recognize when a person is struggling to survive and when a person is simply refusing to care. I looked down at the ledger for the Good Samaritan Fund. This fund is built from the donations of people from all over the world who watch our proceedings online. They send $5, $10, sometimes $100. They tell me, "Judge, use this for someone who needs a hand up, not a handout." It is a sacred trust. I don't use it for the Anthony Rosses of the world. I use it for the Marcuses, the ones who have reached the end of their rope but are still trying to climb. By giving Marcus those $50, I wasn't just giving him money for a meal. I was giving him the collective support of thousands of strangers who believe in him. I wanted him to feel the weight of the world lift, even if just for a night. I wanted him to go home to his mother and say, "We aren't alone. People see us." In a digital age where we are often reduced to data points, there is a deep, primal hunger for human connection. People want to know that common sense and decency still exist behind these mahogany benches. I sat in my chambers for a long time after the court had adjourned, watching the evening light fade into a soft purple hue over the city of Providence. The building was quiet now. The halls that were once filled with the nervous energy of hundreds of people, the frantic whispering of lawyers, and the heavy footsteps of those seeking answers were now silent. I looked at the black robe draped over the back of my chair. It is a heavy garment, not just in its physical weight, but in what it represents. It represents the trust of the people, the power of the state, and the delicate balance of a civilization that seeks to be both orderly and just. My mind kept returning to Marcus. I could still see the way he looked, that specific, hollow kind of exhaustion that isn't just about a lack of sleep, but about the crushing weight of responsibility at an age when he should be free. I thought about the thousands of people who walk the streets of this city every day, many of them just like Marcus. They are the waitresses, the warehouse workers, the students, and the silent caregivers. They are the invisible gears that keep the heart of this city beating, often without recognition and certainly without reward. In my years on this bench, I have come to realize that the law is a tool, but like any tool, it must be used with precision and care. If you use a hammer for every problem, you end up breaking things that were meant to be fixed. For Marcus, the law was a hammer that was seconds away from crushing his spirit and his family's future. By choosing to set that hammer aside, I wasn't undermining the law. I was protecting the very thing the law is supposed to serve, the human being. I thought about Marcus's mother. I could imagine the look on her face when he walks through the door tonight and tells her that the debt is gone, that they have been seen, heard, and supported. That validation is more powerful than any medicine. It tells a struggling family that they matter to the world. And I thought about Marcus in his EMT uniform a few years from now. He will be a great paramedic. Why? Because he knows what it's like to be in a crisis. He knows what it's like to feel the weight of the world on his shoulders. That is the true interest on the investment we made today. By dismissing a few $100s in tickets, we invested in the future of a man who will go on to save lives. My father, Antonio, would have been proud of today. He used to say, "Frank, if you can help someone, you help them. You don't ask for a reason. You just do it because it's the right thing to do." He didn't have a law degree, but he had a wealth of character that I have spent my entire life trying to emulate. I picked up my pen one last time to sign the final dismissal order. It felt like more than just paperwork. It felt like a catalyst for hope. As I walked out of the building and into the crisp night air, I looked at the flickering lights of the city I love. We are all just walking each other home, navigating the challenges of life and stumbling from time to time. The measure of a society isn't how many people it punishes, but how many people it helps to stand back up. "You are making us proud, Marcus," I whispered to the night air. I went home, ready to rest, knowing that in one small corner of the world today, justice and mercy had met. And because of that, the world was just a little bit better.